Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, those on Facebook, those here in person. Thank you all for joining us for Mentsch at Work. We're going to get started. It's going to be a short class today. And the reason for that is because we have this other interview coming up at 10:30, and I got to get a couple things ready before we get started with that. So we'll go till 10:15 today. But we're also, even though it's the shortest class, one of the shorter classes, we're going to be starting the longest topic. So I don't know how many of you remember when we did Stepping Up Kosher. It was almost like all the other little topics that we did in 1 week or in 2 weeks that were part of kosher were a preparation for the big one, which was milk and meat, which took us like, 10, 20 weeks, whatever it was, somewhere between 10 and 20 weeks to finish covering. Yeah, milk and meat is the big one. Because you got to talk about milk and meat, cooking milk and meat together, and what happens if something falls into it, and 1 in 60, and all these different rules, and what about washing dishes together, and all the different rules that go into milk and meat. Milk and meat is kind of the largest topic when it comes to the laws of kosher, like bugs, the laws of checking your fruits and vegetables for bugs, takes you, for insects, that takes you 1 week. I mean, obviously, if to do it properly, it would take a whole journey, but at least in our class, the level that we were doing it, it took us just 45 minutes. We covered that topic, and then we moved on. Maybe 2 weeks. I think it was 2 weeks for instance. Anyways, my point is that when it comes to the laws of being a mensch in the workplace, there are a lot of different mitzvot. As we started off at the beginning of our class, we introduced quite a few of them. And when we introduced those, we discussed that there's going to be lots of different mitzvot, and we went through many of those mitzvot already up till today. And now we are approaching the biggest topic. And this topic is going to take us, I would say, pretty much all the way up until Pesach. And the questions that you have are very often going to be answered with. We're going to be discussing that further along as we move along. So I'm going to ask you don't ask questions like a what if kind of question, because most likely we're going to be covering that kind of a scenario. What am I talking about? Anybody know what I'm talking about here? Two topics that go together. I'm talking about the topic of borrowing and lending money, and together with that was the laws of interest. This is going to touch on a lot of different topics in business, as it does even just in the secular world, right? As Vicky pointed out to us, that she worked in the loan industry, and almost everything has a loan somewhere involved, right? There's a loan somewhere. Getting the building up, or getting the construction started, or buying your first home, or starting a new business, and everything. There's always a loan involved somewhere. So when money exchanges hands, and it's going to be a loan, and there's an intention for the loan to be repaid, often, especially in the secular world, there is a concept called interest, which is that you have to pay back that money with an additional amount of money. Now, according to the pure level of interest from the Torah, that is not allowed. You're not allowed to make interest off of a loan. But as we're going to see, that over the years, this became a little bit iffy, and there are instances in which it will be allowed, etc., etc. So we're going to talk about that. Now, before I just move on from that, it is also important to understand that together with this comes the laws of investing. Okay, because investing is essentially, to some degree or another, a loan. Yes, Vicky? Do they use that terminology, or investments and loans are totally different in the financial industry?
Well,
when they talk about
equity is different than lending,
right?
Because when you're investing and you don't have a promise
right.
to have to repay, right? The difference with a loan is I promise to pay.
Right. Okay. So we're going to talk about a lot of those differences, and that's basically what we're going to be talking about in the next 10 to 12 weeks. Okay, so let's get started with loans. We're going to start with loans. We'll get to interest a little later, although obviously those two overlap a lot. But let's start over with loans. And the first thing we need to do is we need to talk about the fact, very, very different from the secular world. This is probably the first place that we're going to get a complete diversion from the secular world, like a totally opposite approach. The Shulchan Aruch starts off by quoting a verse from Shemot. It's actually not next week's parsha, the parsha afterwards. So 2 weeks from now. The Torah tells us, mitzvot aseh lahavot la'aniya Yisrael. It is lending money to the poor among the Jewish people fulfills a positive mitzvah. As it says in the Torah, shenemar im kesef talve es ami. It says, should, and here he puts the Hebrew word im, which we'll talk about in just a second, should you lend money to my nation to the poor among you? Although generally the word im implies a voluntary activity, like normally would be translated as if, not should. Right? In this instance, our sages received the tradition, all the way from Sinai, that the matter is not left to one's volition, but is in fact an obligation. Thus, the Mechilta comments, the Mechilta is a medrash. Should you lend money to my nation? This is an obligation. Is it in fact an obligation? Perhaps the matter is left to one's volition, because the verse states im, but we have another verse in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, which states, you must extend credit to him. In Hebrew, havet tavitenu. From this we can conclude that our verse involves an obligation. According to this interpretation, the reason the verse uses the word im is to allow for the interpretation, should you lend money, you should lend money, you should lend to my nation and not to the Gentiles, to whom among my nation, to those who are among you. And in this context, Bava Metzia teaches a poor relative is given priority to other poor people. The poor of one's own city are given priority over the poor of another city. In other words, the mitzvah of lending money to a poor person is greater than the mitzvah of giving charity to, in other words, if and when you're going to be lending, there is a little bit of voluntary element to it. It is an obligation. If you have if you have the ability to lend to someone, you have an obligation to lend to them. However, who you lend to is going to be a matter of voluntary input, and that is that if you have the ability to lend and you have a poor relative that is poor, you start with them. A Jew or a non-Jew, you start with a Jew. Somebody in your city or somebody in a different city, you start with the people in your city, etc. And that's the way it's going to work with regards to loans. Now, the mitzvah of lending money to a poor person, and of course, lending money to a poor person greater than lending money to a rich person, etc. The mitzvah of lending money to a poor person is greater than the mitzvah of giving charity to the poor. I'll pause here for a moment just to quote Rambam Maimonides in his Laws of Charity, Hilchot Matnot Aniyim, the laws of giving money, giving gifts to the poor. He talks about 8 different levels of charity. In subsequent, he actually starts from the highest level and goes down subsequently to lower and lower levels of charity. And the highest level of charity is giving someone a job. We don't often think of that as charitable. We think of that as like almost selfish. I need somebody to work for me, so I'm hiring them, right? But often when you hire someone and you make a point of hiring someone that you know needs a job, not just somebody that this is an extra for them or whatever, right? So that actually it's an act of charity to them. Similarly, teaching a man a profession, also considered an act of charity. Another act of charity is giving a loan. It's one way of doing charity is to give somebody a loan. But it's greater to give somebody a loan than to give them money, which is a very interesting fact, because people often think the opposite. Right? Like somebody comes to you with a loan, hey, listen, I can't pay my rent at the end of the month, I need $500, can you spot me $500? You think to yourself, this is such a great opportunity, right? I'm going to give them $500. They're asking me to borrow $500. I'm going to give it to them. No, take it. Here's a gift, $500, like you can pay rent at the end of the month. Right? You think you're being even more charitable by doing that? No. Turns out it's better to loan it to them. Now, I will tell you that in your head, you're allowed to think, if they don't pay me back, I forgive it. That's fine. But to give it to them as a loan is a greater act of charity. Why? Because in the latter instance, in other words, when you just give charity, the person has already been forced to ask for alms, while the person who asks for a loan has not sunk that low. Right? Think of who is more desperate. Who has lost more of their dignity? When you get so low that Annie, please can you give me $500? I wish I could ask for a loan, but I can't. Can you just give me a gift of $500? I've already sunk so low that I'm asking for alms, I'm asking for handouts. And the Torah has spoken sharply concerning...
That's the expression, I'm not asking for a handout, I'm asking for a loan.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And sometimes they are asking for a handout. They're doing so asking for a loan. And for you to give them a loan is allowing them to preserve that level of dignity, to give them a loan. And like I said, in your mind, you're allowed to think this is tzedakah. That's fine. And the truth is, it's tzedakah even if they pay you back. But you're allowed to tell them, like for example, what people do often respond, which is appropriate according to halacha, is to say, here's the $500. Like let's say I come to Annie, hey, I really can't make rent at the end of the month. Can you loan me $500? I'll pay it back to you within 30 days. And you know, Annie, that I'm actually in a pretty desperate situation, etc., etc. You're allowed to tell me, hey, I'm going to give you the $500. Please, pay it back whenever you can. God willing, Hashem should bench you. You should be able to pay it back whenever you can. You don't need to rush in 30 days. And if you don't pay it back, I forgive it. But pay it back whenever you can. In other words, you're allowing me to still have my dignity that it's a loan, but you're doing it in a way that it's much more right. So that would be the appropriate response. Anyways. The Torah has spoken sharply concerning a person who refrains from lending to a poor person, so this is poor specifically, not concerning somebody who comes to the bank for a loan, the bank refuses them a loan, that's a different story, right? When you look wickedly at your poor brother, a person who lends money to a poor person in need is assured by the Torah in Isaiah, when you will call, God will answer. When you call, Hashem will answer, because you answer those that are in need with a loan, so Hashem will answer you whenever you need. It is also a mitzvah, this is halacha number 2, it is also a mitzvah to lend money to a rich person who is forced to borrow and to give him the benefit of good advice. Right? So you have a rich person, but for some reason he's not, what's the term? Cash rich? Poor. He's cash poor, right? So he needs a loan, even though, he's not liquid?
He's not liquid.
He's not liquid.
Illiquid.
He's illiquid, okay.
Cash poor is basically it's locked up.
Right, so locked up and whatever it is. So it's a mitzvah even to give to him and to give him the benefit of good advice. Number 3, it is forbidden to give a loan even to a Torah scholar without the transaction being observed by witnesses.
And excuse me, even a rich person, you can't charge interest, correct?
We're going to get to the interest. The interest is a whole different conversation. Because for me to say you cannot charge interest, yes, according to the Torah, you'd be right. But according to practical laws today, there is a way to charge interest. And we'll talk much more about that when we get to the interest. But so far, we're just talking about the obligation to give a loan. It is forbidden to give a loan, even to a Torah scholar, without the transaction being observed by witnesses. You have to make sure it's observed by witnesses, unless collateral is given as security. Preferably, one should draw up a contract of a loan. So ideally, there should be a contract, there should be 2 witnesses, and there should be collateral. Okay, if there's no collateral, is one thing, but at least there should definitely be 2 witnesses together with the contract. It is, and that, by the way, that applies even if it's me and Larry, good friends. Hey, I see him every day, and we don't need a contract. It's fine. I trust you, or whatever. And I'm the lender, maybe, right? We could do that from today to tomorrow. There's a Yiddish expression. I'll translate it in English. They say that if you sign a contract like Jews, you'll end up fighting like goyim. That's the term. If you sign a contract like goyim, then you'll end up fighting like then you'll end up paying back like Jews. In other words, basically start off, the contract should be as if we don't know each other, we don't trust each other, and it's completely, we're foreigners to each other, etc. Right? Do it that way. Why? Like that, when it comes to the end of the contract, you should end up resolving it properly and in a proper manner, the way Jews would want to do so. Right? But if you do the opposite, if you sign the contract like Jews, it's okay, we know each other, we're good, we're friends, we love each other, then in the end you'll end up fighting like a whole bunch of in a very embarrassing manner. So I thought that was a very good line.
I've seen that so many times.
Yeah,
on family.
It's a Yiddish expression, but it's so true.
The biggest problem.
Yeah. Exactly.
Misunderstandings when you're going to pay, who's going to pay. So the contract.
So even if you're signing a contract with your brother, and maybe even more important even if you're taking a loan from your brother, and maybe even more important when you're taking a loan from your brother, it's very important that there be a contract. I think so. Yeah. Okay. What? Okay. It is forbidden to pressure a borrower for payment when one knows that he does not have the means. It is even forbidden to pass in front of him, for it will embarrass him to see the person to whom he lent money when he has no means to repay. Regarding this, the Torah warns, do not appear to him as a debt collector. Okay, so there is a prohibition in the Torah which is called loisia loikanoisha. You should not be like a collector, like a debt collector, in front of somebody else. So if I borrow money from Yehuda, and the day is coming closer, and Yehuda knows that I don't have the money to pay him back, Yehuda has an obligation as he's coming towards me, and he knows I'm going to feel uncomfortable when I see him, and the time is coming. He knows I don't have money to pay him back. He has an obligation to cross the street so that I don't see him. So, Rosa, don't fold too many tables because they're going to learn here soon.
What?
The Hebrew school is coming to study here soon.
Again?
Yeah, every Sunday morning at 10:30. It's okay. This is enough tables, but don't fold too many of them. Don't fold all of them. Thank you. She's trying to get a leg up for Krav Maga. She forgot that there's something else in between. Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. So in other words, you have an obligation to make sure that you're not making somebody else feel uncomfortable just because they owe you money. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's this obligation.
Do they have an obligation, though, to at least try to pay it back, or can they just?
Of course, they have an obligation to try to pay it. No, we're talking about a loan gone wrong. Right. A person doesn't have the money to pay back, and the time has come, and they don't have money to pay them back, etc. And now every time they bump into that person who they owe money to, they're going to be uncomfortable. So the person who lent them the money has an obligation to try and make them feel comfortable. Does that make sense? That's the obligation there. Okay. And maybe this is the point you're making, Vicky. Halacha number 5. Just as it is forbidden for a lender to pressure the borrower for repayment, it is also forbidden for the borrower to maintain possession of money that is rightfully due to his colleague. Telling him, go and come back later, although he has the means to repay him. As it says in Mishlei and Proverbs, do not tell your colleague, go and return. Lech v'shuv. Go and come back. Why? Because if you have the money to pay him back, you have an obligation to pay him back. Okay. It is forbidden to take a loan and use it in an unnecessary manner. Be irresponsible with somebody else's money, let's call it that. So that the principal will be lost and the lender will not have a source from which to collect his debt. This applies even if the lender is wealthy. A person who conducts himself in this manner is called wicked. As it says in Tehillim, a wicked person borrows and does not repay. So this is not even talking about where he borrows and has the money, doesn't repay. This is even if he borrows and then makes himself in a situation, not where it happened to him, right? But he actually goes and uses that money in some way, then locks up the money, and now he doesn't have the money to repay him. There's no way for the lender to get his money back. You're not, as the borrower, you're not allowed to do that. In Pirkei Avot, we are commanded, your colleague's money should be as dear to you as your own. When a lender appreciates that a borrower does not possess this quality and does not deal prudently with other people's money, it is preferable for him not to lend to him, rather than to give him a loan and then be forced to pressure him for payment, and thus repeatedly transgress the prohibition of lo'isiyah le'kenoisha, which is do not appear to him as a debt collector. Right? So this previous prohibition has greater ramifications, greater impact on the whole loan picture, if you will. Why? Because the lender has an obligation not to become a debt collector, right? Not to pressure and force the other person. So that's a prohibition that didn't come into effect yet. Right now, me and Vicky are sitting at the table and we're hashing out a loan, right? Vicky is the lender, I'm the borrower. Vicky, because she has a potential prohibition, in 2 years' time from now, when she's going to come to collect the loan, and I'm not going to have it, she has an obligation not to appear as a debt collector, not to pressure me, right? So therefore, today she has an obligation to judge whether she thinks I'm an appropriate borrower or not, which I think is something that is done on the daily in the loan industry. 1 second. In other words, so Vicky is going to judge me and say, hey, am I somebody who deals irresponsibly with other people's money? Then she's actually prohibited. Not only does she become allowed to refuse a loan to me, she's actually prohibited from giving me a loan. Why? Because then she's putting me in the position, since she knows I'm going to be responsible with her money, then 2 years from now she's going to come and she's going to have this obligation of not appearing like a debt collector, so she can fulfill that obligation 2 years in advance by judging me properly and not giving me the loan to begin with. Because she knows because she knows it'll be because based on what I'm telling you I'm going to use the loan for and how I'm going to use the loan, you think that it's going to be inappropriate and an inappropriate use of your money, and then later on I'm not going to be able to repay, and then you're going to become the bad guy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, in other words, it's totally legal from a halachic perspective to do what loan sharks. What's the term? Loan sharks, right?
Yeah.
Is that a derogatory term?
Hard money
Yeah,
lender.
it's derogatory.
So what's the proper term?
Hard money lender.
A hard money lender? What's the proper term? That's the proper term? A hard money lender, it's appropriate. What they do is actually allow, what?
It's a shark.
It is. They call them loan sharks, right? But I think maybe that's a little bit derogatory.
A hard money lender is somebody who just lends based on the collateral or whatever. They know they may not be able to pay, but they are prepared
To take that risk or whatever it is,
to go collect.
Yeah.
So if you're a Jew, that would be problematic.
Oh, so being a hard money lender, that's the term hard money lender? Yeah, so that would not be allowed from a Torah perspective.
To be a hard money lender.
To be a hard money lender, it seems like, from what I'm hearing this term for the first time today.
Hard money lender.
Yeah, because a hard money lender has the ability and the right to go and collect by any legal means possible. You're not allowed to beat them up. That's a loan shark.
From a Torah perspective, that's there also are many ways that you're legally allowed to.
Right, but you
But-
do pressure them.
If you assess in advance, then you're not allowed to lend to them. If you assess in advance that that's going to happen in 2 years' time from now.
Well, yeah, I mean.
And by the way, obviously this is a very iffy territory, right?
And
Everybody
people
can
do that
say,
because
oh, I
they
assess
want
this
the
way, I assess that
collateral,
way.
Right? They'll lend and they figure, well, okay, worst comes worst, I'll take the collateral, and that causes all kinds of issues.
Issues
You can't
later on,
take
yes.
the person's coat, right? Isn't that part of?
We're getting to that right now, actually, yeah.
So here's a question though. This is historical. Because Gentiles knew the statute. Remember, Jews were forced to
Become money lenders, yeah. We actually just discussed it in the JLI lesson this past Monday. Yeah, go ahead.
That they were forced to be lenders because people knew
Because they were
that
locked out of
we
other-
had more ethical standards.
And that would be these halacha. Well, there was two reasons. First of all, they were locked out of other professions.
Yeah.
That's why they became money lender. And number two is, yes, not Jews trusted Jews because they knew that they had special laws about interest and about collection, etc., and that we had these laws that
They
would.
took advantage
that were-
of it. Some of them.
Okay, could be. That could be the case, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think one could equally argue there were definitely some Jews.
You know, around that time, they basically were were imprisoning Jews and other stuff.
I mean, I think there was also the other way. I'm not saying that. I don't mean to prop up anti-Semitic tropes here, but some of them were also taking advantage and charging higher interest rates than they should have, etc. So, like, there were definitely Jews at fault too, as is always the case. As is often the case, there are Jews that are doing things they shouldn't be, and that continues still today. There are Jews doing things I'm like, you're not going to, just because Bernie Madoff was Jewish doesn't mean I'm going to sit here and defend him, right? That's not how it works. So there are Jews doing unethical things.
Around the Inquisition, they said this is one way to get rid of the debt that we owe.
Yes. So actually, what we discussed this past Monday in the lesson
Not the people off.
was the fact that so many Jews were moneylenders, and the crown. This was actually from the 1300s. This was before the Inquisition. I don't know if it's before, kind of at the starting point. There were many Jews became moneylenders, and then in the 1300s, the crown put a limit on like an interest cap, like a cap on the interest rates. Today, interests are very regulated. Back
We're
then,
talking about doing that right now. Trump has proposed 10%, and it's causing a huge...
as a cap, you're saying,
As a cap on
and
lending.
that would the whole industry would okay.
Yeah.
Either way, but I actually think that today they're more regulated. Interest rates are more regulated today
It is.
than they were back in the day. But this is an instance where there was some regulation, because there was some regulation for sure. And basically, I think the crown had put some form of a cap on the interest rates, and it became like in some countries this ends up happening, that there's the official rate and then there's the rate that everybody's charging.
Right.
So it was kind of like they turned a blind eye. I mean, I think they got to charge taxes on every even if the interest rate was higher than the official cap. So there were many Jews that kind of under the table were lending at higher rates. And then there were Christians that complained about it to the crown. And the crown said, hey, this is an opportunity to mess the Jews over from both sides. We gave them an interest cap. We let them, by turning a blind eye, we let them lend at a higher rate because we made more tax money for that. And now that they did it, they did something illegal, so now we're going to get them on the other end. So what they did was they passed a law canceling all of those loans. Not just the interest, the principal as well. In other words, anybody who owed money to a Jew who had charged a higher interest rate than they were allowed to, now owed them zero.
Right.
And the Jews had to petition back, etc. It was a whole back and forth about it. We discussed it a little bit in this past lesson. It ended up resulting in many questions that were asked the rabbis.
Today. If you lend more than the legal...
The whole loan is canceled?
That you can cancel the whole loan because it's not a legal loan.
Yes, but that also means they need to pay you back the principal.
In theory,
Not necessarily?
but you can also sue and say
That I don't even need to pay back the principal?
I don't pay anything.
So it becomes a gift?
Because it's an illegal loan.
Right, so it becomes a gift? What does it become?
Yeah, it is. And then the government taxes you.
Yeah, because you got a gift, exactly. Yeah.
But
How
in
is it
theory,
illegal?
you can,
I didn't understand.
in some states, you can do that. You know?
I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, if you charge an illegal interest rate, the whole loan can be voided. In fact, that's
Yeah,
what they
it's
were
like
doing
a
during the
loan
mortgage
you're
crisis,
hard
was looking to
lending.
see if there was some way to claw back the loan rather than let you foreclose, because there was something illegal in the loan. Not just the rate,
Yeah.
but anything.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about collateral, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, when a person lends money and receives collateral, he should not use the collateral because doing so would resemble taking interest. In other words, you don't have the collateral in order to use it for the period. You didn't rent, let's say it's a car. Right? The car is the collateral. You didn't rent the car for those 2 weeks. You have the car in your possession just in case it doesn't pay the loan, then you can sell the car. Right? But you can't just use the car for those 2 weeks. There are, however, certain instances where the collateral may be used. For example, if one lent money to a poor person and received a plowshare or an axe as collateral, the lender may hire it out even without asking the consent of the borrower and deduct its hire from the debt. We can assume that the borrower would consent because a high fee is paid for the rental of these items, and their depreciation is minimal. So that's the key here. The key here is there's an item that you have in your possession. It's being used as collateral. It's being used. It's sitting and doing nothing. Right? The item is worth money every minute that it exists. It's worth money. Let's say a plowshare. Right? It can be rented out and people can use it. The depreciation would be very, very minimal. A plowshare can get millions of uses out of it. Right? And then when you do that, you can use that and then lower the debt of the person because you're making money off of this collateral during that period, right?
You can't use the money for yourself.
No, of course not. Yeah. You can use it's not a business investment. Yeah. There are opinions that maintain that even in these instances, the lender is entitled to hire out the collateral only to others, but may not hire it himself. Why? Lest others suspect that he is using the collateral free in exchange for giving the loan. Because what he would not be allowed to do is to use the plowshare free of charge. Now, in theory, it would work very well for him. Why can't he be the person who rents the plowshare and then deduct that from the thing? But because of Maris Ayin is the appearance of things, the optics, right? It's going to look like he's just using it free of charge and taking advantage of a poor person saying, hey, I gave you the $1,000 loan, I have your plowshare until you pay it back, and during that period, I'll just use it for free. I'm taking advantage of you from both sides, right? So because which obviously he would not be allowed to do. Because it will look like he's doing that, therefore he's not allowed to be the one who borrows it. If the lender does not take the collateral at the time the loan is granted and desires to take it afterwards, he should only do so according to the instructions of a court. So there's going to be lots of different laws. If at the beginning of a loan, this is the collateral and it exchanges hands just like the loan exchanges hands, so then that's great. But if it is just, but if it's already, whatever, a few weeks into the loan, and now he wants to take collateral, even if both sides agree, it has to be done in a court of law, and there's only certain ways that would be allowed and other ways would not be allowed. Okay. This is where we're going to end today. I'm not going to take, I'll take questions, but without any obligations to answers, because really, no, what I mean is because we're really halfway through, even this particular subject of loans, without even getting to interest yet. We're just halfway through, and there's going to be so many other what ifs as we go along. But with this, at least we began the conversation of borrowing money and lending money from a Torah perspective, which definitely is part of the Mentsch work saga. And next week we will continue, and then we'll turn to interest, and we'll turn to when interest is allowed, and how interest is allowed, and how investments are allowed, etc. So thank you all for joining us for Mentsch work. We'll see you all next week, God willing. Same time, same place, different bagels.